That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
The Camilla Tominey Show, only on GB News.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day, but equally it's because it champions free speech, and as a journalist that's what I'm all about. Every Sunday morning at 9:30 we're packing into 90 minutes solid punchy politics with a bit of a twist. We not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30 on GB News.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Fridays from 8, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, only on GB News.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day, but equally it's because it champions free speech, and as a journalist that's what I'm all about. Every Sunday morning at 9:30 we're packing into 90 minutes solid punchy politics with a bit of a twist. We not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
The Camilla Tominey.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It's Saturday night and this is the Saturday 5. I'm Darren Grimes along with Albie Ammon-Corner, Emily Carver, Benjamin Butterworth and Lynn May tonight on the show. Well, why are we in Britain paying for illegal migrants who have abused police officers in France?
With 1 in 5 school children regularly skipping school, whatever happened to parental responsibility?
Have Brits turned into work-shy, lazy losers?
If Sunak thinks he can win an election, why won't he call one?
I think it's about time we scrap the archaic, out-of-date term race.
It's 8 p.m. and this is the Saturday 5. Welcome to the Saturday 5. It's very hot outside and it's likely to get pretty heated in here as well over the next hour. So grab yourself a cold drink or two and get ready for some feisty debate. As you know, every week Albie, Emily, Benjamin and myself are joined by a guest star. And tonight it's none other than Lynn May.
Yes, now the premise of the show is simple. Each of us gets 60 seconds to outline our argument about our chosen topic. Then we all pile in and the discussion starts. As always, please do let us know what you think. Get in touch by emailing gbviews@gbnews.com. But before we start tearing each other apart, it is your Saturday Night News with Aaron Armstrong.
Very good evening to you. Let's get you up to date with the headlines from the GB newsroom. Escaped terror suspect Daniel Khalif has been apprehended, bringing an end to his 4 days on the run. He was pulled from a bicycle by a plainclothes officer on a canal towpath in Northolt, West London, 12 miles from Wandsworth Prison. That's where he escaped from on Wednesday. The search focused on Chiswick earlier after witnesses placed him in the area. The Prime Minister praised efforts by the police, and Commander Dominic Murphy, the Met's counter-terrorism chief, says the public played an integral role.
We've had a significant number of counter-terrorism detectives working on this and officers and staff from across SO15 here, but also a huge amount of support from the wider Metropolitan Police who have been utterly dedicated to trying to find Daniel. And so at that moment in time, there were a large number of officers in the southwest London area all searching for Daniel, and I'm pleased to say that's what led to his capture this morning. The media and the public have played a very, very substantial role, and that cooperation has been so significant in finding Daniel and making sure that he's back in custody today.
More than 1,000 people have been killed and hundreds more are injured after a powerful earthquake in central Morocco. The scale of the damage can be seen in these pictures from Amiz, a town at the foot of the Atlas Mountains, around 40 miles southwest of Marrakesh, which was the epicentre of the quake. And many of the deaths are understood to be in these remote areas, further complicating rescue efforts. The 6.8 magnitude earthquake is the strongest to hit the North African country in a century. Relatives of 10-year-old Sarah Sharif have been detained for questioning by police in Pakistan. Her father, his partner and their children fled the UK for Pakistan after Sarah was found dead at her home in Woking last month. A post-mortem examination found she had suffered multiple injuries over an extended period of time. Rishi Sunak says he's optimistic the UK and India can overcome any final hurdles in negotiations and conclude a free trade deal. The Prime Minister held talks with his Indian counterpart, Narendra Modi, at the G20 summit of the world's leading economies. It was in Delhi earlier. Delegates have agreed on a joint declaration, including a strong statement on the war in Ukraine, although the statement didn't directly criticise Russia. President Vladimir Putin and indeed the Chinese leader Xi Jinping were not at the summit. This is GB News across the UK. On TV, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker too. Just say play GB News. Now, it's back to the...
Thanks, Aaron. It's Saturday night. You're with the Saturday 5. I'm Emily Carver, and I can promise you are in for a very lively hour this evening. So let's crack on with tonight's first debate. Now then, Darren is going to tell us about why UK taxpayers are footing the bill for crimes committed on French soil. Yes, you heard, it is grime time.
Absolutely, Emily. This story makes me as red as your dress. Last week, I was in Israel last week, and I was right in the eye of the storm as Israeli police squared off with Eritrean migrants. Now, this sparked a no-nonsense declaration from Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
What happened yesterday crossed a red line. It's a riot, it's bloodshed. These are riots we cannot accept. Therefore, the first thing I do is to wish recovery to the police officers who were injured during the attempts to restore order. We ask for strong measures against the rioters, including the immediate deportation of those who took part in it.
Now, you at home might well be thinking, fair enough, but enter the London-based keyboard warriors, quick to shout racism and absolutely anything. Now, in my opinion, Netanyahu is a leader who stands his ground, right, defending Israel's borders without apology. He's not just talking about deportations, he's actually pledging fences across its border with Jordan, for example, to thwart illegal migration to Israel. Now, here's the kicker. Israel isn't a country that surrendered its border security to some pontificating European court that loves to school Britain on human rights. I was reminded of this when yesterday's headlines declared 2 Channel migrants who dared to assault French police are now behind bars. Now, wait a second, because you might think they're behind bars in their own countries, such as Iraq or Sudan, where they hail from, but they're not. They're not even in France. They're serving time at His Majesty's pleasure, all on your dime. And let's not kid ourselves here. They'll be out faster than you can say Britain, the soft-touch nation. Can you picture a UK Prime Minister labelling these thugs as infiltrators and swearing to defend our borders come hell or high water? In comparison to Netanyahu, our current Parliament is a gaggle of parliamentary pussycats, not a single roaring British lion among them. And as for Emmanuel Macron's 2 cents on Britain's potential exit from the Strasbourg ECHR court, or his stance maybe on migrant returns to France, frankly, I couldn't care less. Because mark my words, Rishi Sunak, your own Macron-level Rugby World Cup embarrassment is just around the corner. I mean, Emily, do you agree that Rishi Sunak is going to have somewhat cooked his goose if he's not going to be actually robust on this and actually do something? Because so many viewers are writing in saying, I cannot for the life of me understand why we, as British taxpayers, are putting these people up in our prisons.
Well, I think it's because they managed to, after they tried to beat up the French police, they managed to get on board the dinghy and cross over to UK waters. So that's probably why. But what I can't understand is that these 2 guys have been charged with attempting to arrive in the UK illegally. But from what I can see and what from everyone can see, many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands have done the same thing. So I'm wondering why they haven't been sentenced with a crime. Is it simply because they were aggressive on the French border? I'm very, very confused about that one.
I mean, Benjamin, you must, as a Zionist yourself, I think you may self-declare as that, would you? Would you agree with Benjamin Netanyahu's comments?
No, because I think there's a slightly different point to the one you make, but I think supporting the state of Israel and supporting the incumbent Israeli Prime Minister is not the same thing. And I've been to Israel many times. I'm a big supporter of its right to exist. But look, you know, Netanyahu says a lot of things, but his country's in a bit of a mess domestically, so I'm not sure he's the greatest leader going. Now, what I don't understand with these people being in British prisons is that if you have committed a crime and you are a foreign national, you should go back to that country. That's the same reason you nod, but that's the same reason why I think Shamima Begum should be in prison here and not in a camp in northern Syria, because the country where people are from is where they should be in prison.
So do you think it was wrong then for Keir Starmer to be against the prisoner deportations when he was one of the 50 signatories of that letter, who was trying to get people to stop being deported to the countries that they were from because of crimes they'd done in the UK?
Well, it depends slightly on when they came here. So
Does it? Why?
Because I think some of these people came here when they were like 7 years old, and so the idea that, let's say they were from Ghana, for example, the idea that you would send them to Ghana for committing a crime at 25 when they came here at 5 years old would not be reasonable. If you came here as a child, you have no connections, maybe no language skill from the country you're from. I think that is immoral, it's unethical. But if you came here as an adult and you commit a crime, then you should be out the door.
Lynn, then turning to you, do you think there is any argument that suggests maybe there's a nuance between Benjamin's argument and my own argument, or do you actually side with one over the other?
I'm quite balanced on this, but the thing that annoys me mostly about this immigration debate is how people in England, when they say we need to do something about migration, they are stigmatised, they are called racist. But if you look at some of the countries around the world, take from where I'm from, for example, Barbados and Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, their immigration policies are far harsher than ours. So why do we never criticise them? Every country should have a right to protect their borders, but at the same time, where I include some nuance and some context is that many of us now enjoy going to, let's say, Turkish dineries and Indian restaurants and so on and so forth. And we have to understand that many of these people did actually come here illegally because there's not safe routes of passage. If there were safer routes to come here, then we wouldn't see we've not seen so many people come here illegally. So I'm not going to say it's right. I do think we need to do something about it. However, when you close so many legal routes, you're going to get illegal immigration. And I always ask people that are hugely critical, I'm more critical of our government as opposed to the people that are coming here, because wouldn't you, if you had an awful life, wouldn't you try and go somewhere else?
I think you're wrong about that, though, because you could get on a flight to the UK and then try and claim asylum. People are coming in this way because it's easier and you can get around the protocol. So even if we had so many safe and legal routes, people would still take different ways. So, for example, people coming from India. We have so many visas available to people coming from India, yet they choose to come on a dinghy because they want to circumvent that. But what I can't get my head around, and no one's answered this, perhaps we have to look at the judgment and look at the sentencing remarks, but why were these two sentenced and now imprisoned for trying to enter this country illegally? Surely that applies to anyone coming in a dinghy. I am confused about this. Can it only be because of the violence?
Yeah, I think the French
that
courts
makes
have
no
said,
sense.
They've committed an offence here in France, you've got to get these lads and get them out. But on that, Lynn May made a point there that I really want your opinion on, which is the fact of Israel itself, what Israel's doing with Eritrean migrants, for example. Why does it always seem like when Britain, which doesn't have rhetoric as strong as that by Netanyahu, when Britain ever says something like, well, you know, we need robust controls here, why is it Britain that is renounced as some kind of unique evil for wanting border controls?
I think it's very bizarre when you hear these arguments coming from the left most of the time against having tough border control. There is absolutely nothing wrong with saying we need a controlled immigration policy. That should be something which all political parties, perhaps apart from the Green Party, can agree upon. We do not want open borders. That would be chaos. We need a strong border. We need a strong immigration policy, which is both controls migration, but allows the skilled migration in that we need to plug the employment gaps in our economy.
Yes, well, I think we'll end it there. But Benjamin, I never knew you'd be Benjamin Send 'em home Butterworth. Anyway,
the only open border party is the one that's in government, because they're the ones that are letting hundreds of thousands of people whose identity we don't know into the country.
Well, do you know what? I actually agree with that. And up next, it's Albie, and he's going to be talking about parental responsibility, or perhaps more accurately, the apparent lack of it. Take it away, Albie.
Data published this week found that 1 in 5 school children are regularly skipping school. That equates to about 1.8 million British school children are skipping school on a regular basis. This is up from 1 in 10 school children since the advent of the pandemic. Now, why is this happening? Some people are saying it's because these children are more anxious, they're depressed after the pandemic, or they simply fell out of the habit of going to school, so they don't want to go anymore. And now, whilst that might all be true, I can't quite get my head around the prospect that today's children, they ask their parents that they don't want to go to school, and the parents' response is, oh, don't worry, darling, you stay at home then. I find that absolutely absurd. I'm in my 20s, granted. My late 20s, it wasn't that long ago that I was at school. The thought of me saying to my mother in the morning, Mummy, I don't fancy going to school today, and her letting me off, is just for the birds. Even more for the birds was Stella Creasy this week on Politics Live, when I simply stated what I thought was the obvious. I think this whole idea that, oh, you know, it's just that kids are feeling a little bit more anxious and we've got to give them more support in schools. Yes, that might be true, but we've also got to give the parents a kick in the posterior to say, you need to get your children to school. This is your responsibility. It's a partnership between school and parents, and the parents have got to play their part.
Albie, that might sound great on GB News, but the actual reality of dealing with families, especially families who are probably working 2 or 3 jobs, and how you work with them, like, you can have all the rhetoric you want. The reality on the ground... Well, you've just, you know, oh, it's just about telling the parents to do better.
That was
the parents in my community are trying really hard for their kids. They're facing a number of barriers, and we can either have this rhetoric at the top and ignore it, or we can watch films like this and think, how can we get more of those people to work with?
So you don't think it's the parents' responsibility?
I think it's everyone's responsibility, Albie.
No, Stella. It is not everyone's responsibility to send children to school. It is the parents' responsibility to send their children to school. Now, I don't know why that has to only sound good on GB News. It seems like plain old common sense to me. We have children going to school today, going to reception, who are unable to turn pages in books, who aren't potty trained, who can't read at the level that you would expect children to be reading at when they're going to school for the first time. When did such low standards become so acceptable in public society? We need to be getting tougher on the parents who aren't doing the right thing for their children. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with saying that parents need a kick in the posterior to do the right thing for their children. Benjamin, you're a pal of Stella's, aren't you? Do you think she was right? Is it everyone's responsibility to send to get children to school?
I think she's dealing with the reality of those families' lives far more accurately than you were. You know, it's easy to say that, oh, just force the kid to go to school. Well, actually, especially once you get to teenage, you know, it can be pretty hard to control some of these young people. You know, they might have all sorts of issues, especially after COVID. And so I think, you know, you have to look at why is it that someone doesn't want to go to school? Are they being bullied? Are they having a wider mental health problem? You know, are they having an issue with a teacher? I think you're better off to look at the issues rather than just shouting at a kid.
I was bullied at school, Lynn May, and I often didn't want to go to school, but my mother always sent me to school. I know that you are from a West Indian background. If you went to your parents, oh, I don't fancy going to school today because I'm feeling anxious, do you think they would have let you stay at home?
Well, I often did do that, and my mother couldn't force me to go to school, and she had to have my father's heavy hand to come and say and put the fear of God in me. And the problem with that is I'm a bit older than you. I'm in my 30s, and now we're seeing children empowered to saying no to their parents. We're seeing TikTok videos, you know, preventing them from even communicating with their parents. Think about their mental health. And I don't think this is something that we just look at the parents with. This is a society issue where children are being empowered to have control over their parents. Now, we can see so much policy that we cannot discipline our children. We are regularly seeing them to go onto things like Childline for the most minor of things. So I'm going to pose this question to you, Albie. If you were to have a 13-year-old that says unequivocally, I am not leaving the house today, how would you get them to go to school?
I would pick them up, physically put them in the car and drive them there. Darren, what would you do?
Oh, well, I said
physically? Oh, I think the police will not be happy about that.
I'd kick them up the posterior. Listen, I actually think this is, and it's going to get on to what Emily's talking about later on, actually. I think this is a wider issue of personal responsibility. If you have kids, that is a massive responsibility, the greatest gift perhaps that anyone will ever know. But if you're not willing, and the Royal Foundation, which was the then Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, now Prince and Princess of Wales, they found loads of stats saying that actually 59% actually reckon it's the school's responsibility to teach a kid to read and write, for example. Now that, to me, is a pretty damning indictment on where we are as a country, where it says, and I did think that was a really interesting point, actually, where kids feel emboldened to just say no. We are raising a generation of entitled little brats.
Yes.
But it's our generation who are these children's parents. Is there anything about how we've been brought up, the things that we've been consuming, Emily, that make people our age or a little bit older worse parents than perhaps our parents or grandparents?
Oh, a lot of my peers at school were allowed to do whatever they wanted. And I had a mum, if she's watching, I have a mum who would get in the car and drag me out of a house party if she didn't approve or if she found out that, you know, there weren't parents there or something. I mean, if no meant no in my household, and that was pretty much how things were done. There was absolutely no way that I'd be able to not go to school. But then I understand that, you know, some people have extremely difficult home lives. I think the problem also is that a lot of parents of these children who aren't going to school probably don't care for school either, and that's maybe the issue. They don't think it's worthwhile either. So why would you force your child to go to school?
It's gone up from 1 in 10 before the pandemic to 1 in 5 after the pandemic. I wonder why that is, Benjamin.
I did truant once. Because Gordon Brown was delivering the budget.
Oh my God!
Okay. I hid in I hid in the spare bedroom to watch it on the television.
Oh my God!
That's the only day I ever truanted.
Well, there's an education, Benjamin.
School to watch Gordon Brown sell off our nation's gold. Still ahead, Benjamin thinks Sunak should approve that actually the people would pick him for PM, and Lynn's sick of race baiting on both sides, and Emily Carver, well, she's asking whether or not we're all turning into work-shy losers. Don't go anywhere.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. So you've been sending in your emails. Frank says, I hate to disagree with Darren, but we have to pay for it. If we don't, nobody will. Well, there you go. Debbie says, when in doubt, blame the French. This is one for you. Right, let's get to our next debate. What have we got on the cards?
Yes, up next, Sunak says the people want him. Benjamin Butterworth says, prove it.
Yeah, that's right. This week, Rishi Sunak called in all of his special advisors in Downing Street, and he said to them, you can only stay if you believe I can win the election. Well, shortly after that, his head of comms quit, so that wasn't a great sign. But it's a bit... Him hoping he can win the election is a bit like me holding out hope that I can still marry George Clooney. It's really not very likely. Of course, this week is a year since Rishi Sunak lost his last election against a woman who lasted less time in Downing Street than a lettuce lifespan. So I'm not sure his election-winning history is very good. But he said, look, I've got 5 pledges that I will meet. I will stop losing everything. So he said he'll halve inflation and stop the boats. Well, I don't want to ruin the end of the story, but he's doing neither. Now, he has said that if he's got the confidence, he said, on the flight to the G20 in India, to say that he is going to win the election and that he should have confidence in him and that he's going to turn it around. Well, I think I'd sooner take HR advice from Lizzo than I would election-winning advice from Rishi Sunak at this stage. The truth is that we've had years of floundering and bluster from Tory PMs who don't know why they're there, don't know what they're doing and don't have support of the country. For almost 12 months, Labour has been 20 points ahead in the polls, which is the biggest, longest lead that has ever been recorded in modern polling. Even Tony Blair didn't get that in the 1990s. So Rishi Sunak is going to go around journalists and advisors saying, I'm going to win this, the people want me. And I tell you what, Rishi, why don't you go to the people? Now, Albie, the only safe seat...
I knew you were going to come to me first. I wonder why that was.
Well, the only safe seat you're more desperate for than the stool you're sat on is a Tory safe seat. So tell me, Albie, do you think Rishi Sunak can win?
Look, I think the general election is not yet decided yet, and the only poll that matters is the poll on polling day. And you're forgetting that it is a very big feat for any political party to turn around an 80 or so seat majority that the Conservative parties currently have. You know, that would require a bigger swing for Labour than we saw with Tony Blair against Major in 1997. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm just saying it's very difficult and it's never actually been done before. I think maybe a more...
Albie.
No, I'm not embarrassed
It is
at all.
embarrassing. You know, you hear a lot of people on this channel who are from the right of the Conservatives or right of the Conservatives. They're furious. You've got people in the middle who are furious because they're not getting things like education right, the schools are crumbling, the waiting lists for NHS are a nightmare. Do you not look at this and think, God, I'm ashamed?
I'm not embarrassed anymore. I was certainly embarrassed last year. I think the last couple of months of Boris Johnson was a disaster. The time that Liz Truss was in office was just dire. I actually still think I have trauma and PTSD from that period. So that was an embarrassing and difficult period to be a Conservative. But now that Rishi Sunak is at the helm, I'm confident that we're on the right track.
Darren, you're from... I think, did you support the Brexit Party in the past? Is that right?
I have... Do you know what, Benjamin? I can't actually remember if I've ever voted for the Brexit Party. Yes, I have, in the European elections.
As on the ball as ever. But tell me, do you think voters like that are likely to return to Rishi Sunak as Tory leader when it comes to the election?
Well, I actually would argue that the voters are looking at both parties and saying, I don't want them because they're both two cheeks of the same behind. Because you talk about Rishi Sunak with the list that he's not delivering. Well, the Labour Party, they are doing more U-turns than they're going to end up in the U-bend. They've committed so many U-turns. Jeremy Clarkson's looking on with envy at them at this point. You've got 28 billion a year on this green investment that they then turned around and said, oh, actually, we're not sure we'd be able to fund that. And then you've got abolishing VAT exemptions on private school fees, meaning more kids end up in state schools. That means you as a taxpayer has to foot that bill. And then you go on and on and on, and the Labour Party has taken more positions than the sodden Kama Sutra. It's absurd, Benjamin.
I mean, I always find it hilarious when people say Keir Starmer U-turns. This from a party that U-turned on who should be Prime Minister 3 times in 3 months. There's,
come on,
there's a level of absurdity
he's
about that.
He's so duplicitous. When he became Labour leader, he was left-wing economically. Now suddenly he's a Blairite or actually Conservative when it comes to tax and spend. He said he was a massive greenie. Now he's rolling back on those. He really is. No one knows who he is. And the reason why I don't want a general election is because the only thing more horrifying than the current government we have is a Keir Starmer government, because looking at that bunch, they did this video that went out on social media, and I mean, what did they look like, seriously? They're not ready for government.
Exactly. So why should the British people trust him? Because he had burrowed himself so far up Jeremy Corbyn's bottom at one point.
Well,
that
exactly.
He basically lived there. Now he says he was a horrible thing and got rid of him.
You know,
so
It's so interesting because the question was, can Sunak win as he claims he can? And you can't offer any defence of Sunak. You can only attack ideas of what the opposition might do.
But that's a problem, though, Benjamin, because...
I think he could win. I think he could win
Tell us why.
if he was given a little more time, which I know we don't really have. But I actually think Sunak is what the party needs in terms of stability. He's experienced, he understands management of money, the economy. The only shame is that he's been left with such a disaster to try and turn things around. But I'm with you. Like, yes, I think the Conservatives are an absolute shambles, and multiple political commentators would tell you that no government should be in power longer than 10 years. They're tired, they've had their run. However, can we really see any form of success under a Labour government?
I mean, yes. You know, I always find it remarkable.
What, under Keir?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you last had a Labour government, taxes were lower, growth was higher, waiting lists were shorter, illegal immigration was lower. All of those things that the Tories claim they're going to do.
Yeah, because you inherited, because Blair inherited perfect conditions from Clark and Sir John Major. That's why Blair was able to do
years later, that
everything that he wanted to do.
Clark and John Major.
Right, well, yes, that's enough of that. Still to come tonight, Lynn May tackles divisive race baiters, and I'll be asking why we've become such work-shy layabouts. You're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News, but first, it's your weather.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. So it's been another very warm or hot day, especially across the southeast today, and that's because we've still got a bit of a southerly component to our winds, bringing that warm to hot air across us from the continent. Showers that we've seen through today will slowly ease as we go through tonight, but another area of heavy showers and thunderstorms will start to push northeastwards from the southwest. So if you are in the southwest tonight, you might be woken up by the odd thunderstorm. And this is all during another warm and humid night. So as we go into the start of Sunday, those showers will slowly make their way northeastwards into Wales, the Midlands, Northern England, Northern Ireland and later into southern Scotland. And these showers could band together, bringing some heavy rain and thunderstorms, as well as the risk of some hail and some strong gusty winds. But it will be another very warm day, especially in the southeast, with highs of 32. Now, to start the new working week, plenty of low cloud mist and fog in the north and west to start, with some showers breaking out later. But this rain erratically making its way southeastwards, marking a change to something slightly cooler as we go into next week, where it will feel quite changeable and autumnal with those temperatures closer to average.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't go anywhere, because still to come, Emily says we need to get our behinds in gear. Are we now a work-shy nation? You're with the Saturday 5, live on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton, for 2 hours packed full of unfiltered opinions, unique takes, and fiery debates. I guarantee you blockbuster guests and exclusive reporting with no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly.
And no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio, and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. As always, cheers very much for your emails about tonight's topics. Paul's written in, he says, that's the first time I've ever agreed with Benjamin. He's right. Sunak is toast. Well, there we are. Now, it's time for our next debate. It's Emily. And Emily's going to be asking, why do Brits hate work so much? It's time for the Carver Palaver.
Yes, Brits don't like work. According to a poll of 24 countries, we're the least likely to think it's important. We're also the least likely to say it should take priority over having fun. And only 39% of us believe that hard work will bring us a better life in the long run. Let that sink in. Only a little more than a third of us actually think working hard will benefit our lives. If you have that attitude, if you're thinking grafting isn't going to make the slightest bit of difference to your life, why would you even bother trying to get on? Let's face it, a lot of Brits would rather have their feet up with a cup of tea or a pint of beer than bother trying to crack on. But why? Are we all just lazy, work-shy losers who care far too much about the life part of the work-life balance and hope somehow things will work out in the end? I reckon there's certainly some truth to that, but perhaps it's a tad simplistic. Hear me out. Could the indifference towards work actually be a rational decision? For a lot of people, work simply doesn't pay, or at least not enough to make working hard worth it. You work your 9 to 5, you get to the end of the month, the tax man has slashed your payslip in half, and you think to yourself, what's the point in doing any more than the bare minimum? Perhaps you're a graduate who now faces the equivalent of a 55% marginal tax rate, and you don't have a hope in hell of getting on the property ladder anyway. And even those lucky enough to be on £100,000 a year, why bother putting your nose to the grindstone, taking on more hours trying to get a promotion when you'll see only about 40% of whatever extra you take home? And on top of all that, you're bloody fed up at seeing our taxes squandered by incompetent politicians. It all feeds into a feeling of what's the point? I'm not sure a kick up the bum is going to solve this conundrum. So there you go. I think that was a nice balanced perspective from me. So who should I go to? Lynn May, what do you think? Now, I've seen a few tweets of yours here and there that suggest you might think that there are some work-shy Brits about.
No, I think there are, and I think we always are massively critical of specifically economic migrants. But then I've got a couple of properties, and recently I've had a lot of migrants wanting to view my properties, and I asked them, you know, well, what were you in your country? And I have things such as scientists and teachers and lecturers and accountants, and I'm like, well, what are you doing here? And they're carers. And I'm thinking, when I used to be in welfare to work, I would constantly see British people refuse jobs because they think they're either too qualified, too good, can't be bothered, not the right hours, or just don't fancy it. So we always wonder, OK, why should we allow migrants to come in and take our jobs? But we don't even want these jobs ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Benjamin. I think there are a lot of Brits who maybe have a bit of an arrogance. They think they're going to start on loads of money and they don't have to climb the ladder and, think they know it all.
No, I don't think that's fair. I mean, for a start, Brits work some of the longest hours of any Western economy, and we're one of the least...
I'm not sure that's true anymore,
that's true.
And we're also one of the least efficient in Europe. So the hours we work and the productivity that comes out of it do not correlate very closely.
So we're just a bit rubbish, then?
Well, it suggests a lot of people at work are not doing that much, right? And that's a broader problem. I think you're absolutely right to say that the reward for work does not make sense. If you look at the cost of housing, particularly in big cities in the southeast, then it's very difficult to get on that housing ladder for lots of salaries at the moment. And you can see why that puts people off pursuing work in the same way.
Yeah, but work is not just about monetary gain. It's about well-being. It's about feeling fulfilled. It's about making your mark in the world, to get up in the morning and say, I'm adding to this. I'm being successful within my role. And I think if we just look at money, we're never going to be satisfied.
I mean, let me just say something, which is, I agree with you. First of all, it's slightly easy to say if you've managed to get the security of owning a few properties to feel like that, right? You have the advantage of...
Because I've worked my butt off, multiple jobs.
Fine.
How many jobs have you had?
I've had I have several jobs right now.
Amazing.
I work for
So why can't more
GBNews, I
people
work for a
do that?
newspaper, I do lots of things.
Well, exactly, Benjamin. You are a shining example of someone who will get up early in the morning, whatever day, weekend, whenever, stay up late to do,
I'm full of a cold today.
Whatever you need.
And you're still here.
But I was just going to say, actually, to agree with Lynn, that when I was 16, and I was raised by my grandparents, and they were very clear, even though maybe they had the finances to pay for whatever was needed, they were not going to give me the money. You go out, you get a job, and you pay for yourself. And I got a job in a call centre at 16, and it built my confidence and socialised me in a way that has changed the rest of my life. And that's why I think it's so important you go out and get a job.
Did you manage to sell anything?
I was #1. I worked in 2 call centres. I was #1 telesales of all time.
You know what?
Gift of the gab.
That was probably a great experience for journalism. Absolutely. Gift of the gab. Albie, what do you think? Are we work shy?
Well, I think what's really interesting about this survey is I think they surveyed a number of different countries in Europe. And actually, I think we can probably argue that on taxation and a lot of other economic situations going on at the moment, most of the European countries are quite similar. Yet Brits seem to be the ones that don't think work is going to pay off in the end. So why is that? With equivalent economies like France, Germany, they seem to think working does pay, even though there's similar or high levels of taxation. But in Britain, we don't think work is going to pay off. I can't quite put my finger on why that might be.
I think innately, us as Brits, we like to have a moan. I think also it feeds into the current culture, especially with Gen Z and younger millennials, that when we see people overnight becoming a success, whether it's on the internet and such and things like that, it makes you feel, why should I get up and go to my 9 to 5 when Mr. So-and-so has made 20,000 being on Instagram for like a year? I think this is feeding into a lot of people.
But they don't see the work that goes into that. I mean, most people will roll their eyes when they think of Instagram influencers, but most Instagram influencers do put in a lot of graft while working another job to begin with. That's me standing up for influencers there.
You're trying to be one.
Why. Darren, what do you think?
Well, look,
do you see, let's say where you come from, where you grew up, were there a lot of people it became a culture to not work?
Yes, but only because that's what all they've ever known, where their mum and dad haven't worked, right? And it becomes a dependency on welfare, it might even be a dependency on alcohol, who knows? But when I was 15, Emily, I actually agree with what Benjamin said. I got a job in a hairdresser's as a Saturday boy, and I think it was the best thing I ever did because it meant I was confident, well, more confident, and actually built up a skill set that I think I have today. Hopefully I can hold a conversation. But some would say far too often.
The viewers can email in on that one.
Yes, let me know. But I remember my granddad saying, you know, he was born in 1930, he's gone now, God rest him, but he used to say when he was a kid, he would cycle out and go look for work. Norman Tebbit said the same thing.
Get on your bike.
Get on your bike. We've lost that generational, we've lost that spirit, that sort of idea of going out and doing it. So what I would say, Emily, is that we need to bring back national service. Now, it doesn't need to look like what it did in the past.
You can go and do it first. I'd like to see that.
Where they actually have to take up some form of work in a community, where they have to be around people and actually build up a skill
I think that's so good. I mean, just looking at both of you, Benjamin and Darren, you said you did these call centre, hairdresser. That is just can be life-changing, right? Just having those conversations, building that confidence as a teenager. So many teenagers now can't string a sentence together, can't pick up the phone, can't talk to someone in a shop.
Is the problem young people not in work, or is the problem older people who are economically inactive?
Well, that's true too.
When we have these conversations about people who are out of work, actually, it's not necessarily the younger people, it's the older people that have decided they don't want to go back into work.
Many of them do actually want to, but I think we need to encourage employers in employing the older generations, because oftentimes if they're up against some of these chatty young people that are a whiz on technology, they just dismiss them when they have a wealth of experience and knowledge. So I think employers need to employ more older people.
Couldn't agree more. I think that's very true. There's so much ageism in recruitment.
Yes, but do you actually think, though, that we're going to get anywhere on this, or do you think actually we're destined to be, you know, a nation of lazy?
I don't know, because we're pumping young people with, I don't know if it's propaganda or just bad news constantly, that they're not going to be getting on. So many young people want to move countries because clearly they think that's the easy way out. It's not going to be greener elsewhere. You know, just crack on here, work hard, do well.
It's that the reward for work is much greater in countries like Australia or Canada at the moment than it is in Britain.
Well, I look forward to the Labour
big
Party cutting our taxes, Benjamin.
So do I. They were lower under the last Labour government.
Still ahead. Lynn May is going to have her say on those she reckons are dividing our country. You're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. Thank you for your emails too. Connor says, no, I'm not having it, Emily.
Ooh.
You can keep sticking up for your type if you wish. But once this generation of greedy have-it-alls are done, there'll be nothing left for the kids of tomorrow, no matter how hard they work. Gosh, depressing. I think a lot of people do feel like that. But at first, but we've got to move on. I'm flabbergasted by that one. I got it completely wrong, clearly. But it's time for our next debate.
Yes, up next, it's Lynn May, who'll be taking on those who create divides where she reckons none ought to exist. Take it away, Lynn May.
May I say, I think it's about time that we eradicate the whole ideology of race. We all want racism to be completely wiped off the face of the earth. What better way to do it than to actually get rid of the ideology of race? There is oftentimes so many people, you know, white this, black that, and if we look historically at race, it was created around the 1600s, does not really mean anything. Let's even look at the term white. What does white mean? Who is actually even white? Go into the sun for 10 minutes, you're no longer white, even though you weren't initially were white to begin with. Black, what does black mean? And for people who are online, they often create this massive divide, often to try and make money and forward their own careers with the likes of, say, Kiende Andrews, who is a professor of black studies, who knows what that means. For the likes of Sophie Corcoran, who likes to now be the ambassador for white people, where she doesn't actually represent so many white people out there. And of course, they're not here to defend themselves. These are obviously my opinions on what I see. But if we want to unite Britain, why are we constantly trying to barrage with this whole stupid, out-of-date, redundant term race? Now, let's look at the different groups in the world. I won't be able to finish all of them, but let's say, for example, Scots, English, Ukrainians, Russians. There is a diverse amount of people who we would once upon a time would have just said are all white. They're all culturally different, all have their own different ways of living. The same with black people. People from, let's say, from Nigeria do not necessarily relate to those from Jamaica. So let's completely get rid of race.
Ooh.
Interesting.
Now, I want to start with Darren. I've often seen you championing, and there's nothing actually wrong with it. I think we should be proud of who we are. But when I see you say, you know, oftentimes white people in, let's say, seaside areas are now not finding the benefits of being in the UK and they're a forgotten group, do you think that terms like white actually makes any sense?
Well, I mean, first of all, you said there that, you know, white people, you go into the sun for a little bit. I could live on the sun and I still wouldn't get a tan.
How did you get your tan now?
Yeah, I was about to say, based on that fake tan, I don't think you are white.
I've got fake tan.
Can I just quickly point, if we just see here, this is what you would call white. Would you say that's the same colour? Because I wouldn't.
Well, I mean, yeah, right, fine.
Are you white?
Well, I think I am, yes, I think so.
But do you think the term colour, to reduce ourselves to a colour,
well, I think it's useful as a metric for what I've probably been talking about, which you mentioned there, which would have been white working class kids, you know, from communities like that, which I come from, but not just that, up and down the country, who actually I do think have been forgotten and who are doing significantly worse in education than their black counterparts. Now, it's great that black counterparts are doing so well at school. Fantastic. But how do we actually talk about getting white working class kids to do better at school
but then shouldn't
without
you
mentioning
just
them?
speak about class then? Because if we just say white, there are multitudes of, let's say, middle to upper class people that have no idea of the experience of a white working class individual. Why not get rid of the term white?
I think we need to get rid of the term BAME, and it does seem to have got less fashionable now, black and minority ethnic, because there are so many disparities between different groups, and you can't just pit one massive blob, B-A-M-E, against the white... Pardon?
But why not white? If we're going to get rid of BAME, because as
well, it's just factual, though, isn't it?
What's factual?
Well, there are white people and there are black people, but there's so many people in between.
But I think the question is why do we hold such gravity to terms like black and white when actually it is no more important than blonde or ginger or brunette or black hair. Like, we don't divide people based on their hair colour, so why does it make sense to divide people based on their skin colour?
But you want to go back to what Emily... So if it's factual, why then are there so many people that don't actually belong to a colour? So you have black and white. What are Asian then? They're not called brown. You have Arabs. You have Chinese people. They're not called any colour. Why is it only black and white?
I completely agree with you, and I agree with you to an extent, because I don't think that it's helpful at all to also call, you know, someone who has dark skin black and group people together under the umbrella of black when we have Afro-Caribbean, we have mixed race, we have African, we have so many different countries where people can have dark skin. And then, of course, you have Asian people and you have all sorts. I mean, I don't think it's good to lump people in together, but I think we often talk about disparities between groups within black or within Asian in this country, and so it's useful to be able to delineate between people, even if not based on white or black.
Yeah, what do you think, Ben? Because I see that Emily's placing heavy emphasis on not calling black people or Asian people, but I'm still, if we're going to not call black people that because there's so much different, you know, nuances, then I think white should be the same. Scots, Ukrainians, they're all not the same. Would you agree or disagree?
I think it would be rewriting history to pretend that the terms don't mean anything, or as though it is equivalent to being ginger or blonde or brown.
But biologically, it quite literally is.
Yes, but that's not the reality of human society.
Only
right?
because of ideology.
If you go to pretty recent history in the US, people that had all sorts of fundamental rights taken away, who were held as slaves, that was because they had black skin. And so I think you can't pretend that that isn't the way in which lots of people have come about in the world, their family history, their experience of how they're treated. Of course, it's irrational in a variety of ways, but it is real.
But then we do rewrite the term race, because when there was a lot of Polish people that came into this country, we then had a box that said white other. I was initially referred to as black. Then in 2001, there was a consensus formulated, and now I'm mixed. So now it keeps changing.
Well, it's all very confusing. Cheers very much, Lynn May, there, with a very thought-provoking one. One last email. Mark says, has Benji had a bang on the head? I've agreed with them twice tonight. Well, there we are. Next up tonight, it's the brilliant Mark Dolan. Cheers very much for watching. We'll see you again next week, where you might agree with Benjamin again. Who knows?
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. So it's been another very warm or hot day, especially across the southeast today, and that's because we've still got a bit of a southerly